to identify students who appeared to have the promise but were not of their own initiative embracing more rigorous academic opportunities. And in one case, I think there were 190 students identified, and some 150 some have been engaged in a cohort.
Yeah,
And what we heard after that was, in different sessions, was that the cohort cohesion became a very strong positive support to pull through issues. Weekly counselor contact to a cohort, those kinds of supports and encouragement to reach beyond what you thought you were capable of. Critical, and that's intentional on our part. And when the student is not necessarily that intentional, or their outside support groups may not be. So I think there are really a lot of positive things were shared today.
I think I would add on that, and mostly I'm glad the order we went in is why I'm saying this, although I do believe it, but it was helpful to go last with the principal and teachers talk about going through the racial equity training. Because for me, what I was able to do is hear what those students say and recognize what was happening, is they were all experiencing implicit biases, but they weren't given access to know that those things were accessible to them. And so it was very different to hear two principals and three teachers who I felt were absolutely converts. One so much so she was sharing it with everybody she knew. And so for me, that spoke to the impact that training had, which I would guarantee you, if we took those teachers and put them in high school, we actually probably wouldn't need a cohort, because they would actually ensure that those students knew that those things would be accessible to them.
And we talked about that, scaling it across our staff.
Yeah, we talked about scaling too. Yeah.
But also the use of not just number data on a page,
That's right.
but the observation of really saying what's going on in the classroom.
And the relationships.
And the relationships.
Right.
And belief systems.
Yeah.
We caught a glimpse of it, but we still had more elementary and high.
That's why I made that
And
comment.
there's the middle school hole
Yeah.
that we've got to,
That's
because the middle school hole is what sets the
what they call
stage
flip.
for
We won't
a lot
send you.
of the challenges.
And our student, one of our students actually said, I wish I had actually known this and had this experience in 8th grade. But
Yeah, we
Yeah,
asked
yeah.
that.
we didn't even ask. He
Yeah.
volunteered for us, and I think he's right.
Well, we prompted.
It
We didn't
raised,
prompt.
Tip my hand.
it raised several questions for me that, as usual, often lead to more staff things. One is that is a board consideration and then a staff consideration. We did have I think it was an AP, but the other principals said we should
They
mandate
did.
that all principals get this training. If we mandate it, what kind of pushback do we get that negates the advantages of doing it? And do we even have the capacity to do that in any kind of a timely manner? So that was one issue that I thought was really interesting. Second thing is that it was mentioned that we're beginning the process of inventorying mentoring programs, because we had the Helping Hands mentoring program, which is not the Helping Hands mission that has been. And surprisingly, they're in 14 schools and they have 40 mentors. When this program started with Dr. Bridges way back, I think it was much larger than that. So again, what's happened? And Marvin has suggested that one of the things that's happened is that the budget has been cut for that program over the years. So how do we find things like that? Because we've got elementary kids going through this program, and then we don't even know if they have access to it when they hit middle school. It's just sort of, if they're lucky that goes to a middle school that has it, they get to continue. If not, nobody in the middle school even knows that they were in it. Systemic expansion. I asked Dr. Hedrick how many of our high schools are doing some type of capstone cohort program, and we think it's around 6 at this point. And it's a powerful program. We talked about this a whole lot when y'all were looking at that special program to bring in to do something to help with AP enrollments and participation. That's been 2-3 years ago.
Oh, so Capstone is a piece of that.
Yeah.
And it's a pilot right now. The College Board approved a certain number of schools to participate in Capstone. And we actually requested that they approve more than what we were supposed to be getting, and so we have more than we're supposed to. But it's still sort of pilot.
Yeah.
But I think connected to that, we do have what we're calling the Access to Rigor work group working on, AP capstone-like experiences for students. So how we're using AP potential data to identify and recruit students. It's the relationship that's at the core of AP capstone. So if we can't get more capstone schools, how can we work with AP teachers outside of that to kind of come together, build a cohort of kids, and really invest in the relationship building is kind of where we at with the access to rigor group that we're working with.
And lastly, for me, other people may have things, where are we with following up to the community meeting that we held in partnership with the Flood Group, and are they a group that can help with us recruiting additional mentors and relationship building pieces?
Absolutely, they're a group that can help with recruitment. Right now, the Flood Group and myself, we're in the process of kind of coming to, I guess we could call consensus, what the outcomes were for the February 29th meeting. There is some interest in wanting to do other community forums around the area. So what we're going to put out is probably going to be more of a summary as opposed as a report, particularly if we're going to be collecting data and information, suggestions, solutions from community members in other areas of Wake County. So right now we're kind of working on, kind of what the findings were from that February 29th session. Looking through what we've collected, through the comprehensive plan for equitable discipline practices, at least for the discipline side, we are implementing a lot of kind of what was identified, and we're needing to make sense of some of the other areas. But we should be able to have that out, I'm thinking the first week in May.
Because I don't want the community to think that we're thinking, well, we've done that and we're moving on without us following up with something.
No, I think part of it is we don't want to come off as the one that's also writing the report. We do want this to be a community-driven type of report. So I've had a number of meetings with Flood Group representatives with respect to follow-up and the type of solutions and strategies we want to highlight that came out of the February 29th meeting. So I guess I would have to say that, the delay is probably more on my side. We've had OCR here, planning for this event, has not allowed me to kind of, attack that to the degree that I'd like to. But like I said, I think the first week in May, we should be able to have a summary of kind of what the outcomes were from the February 29th event.
And your office is still you and one administrative assistant?
He's on the deferred list.
He is, so
Correct.
his office is on.
Not for lack of a business case, it just didn't make it.
Right. Keith?
First, I thought this was a great, great piece, and saw a lot of sort of the best practices and innovations and things that are happening in some of the schools. What I felt like we saw was that, and this is not a criticism, but it's some of the best of the best and what's happening in Wake County, and that's a good thing. I'm wondering how, and I think somebody's touched on it already, how we can replicate and scale this up into some of the schools that are struggling and that are having challenges. There were a number of themes, if you will, particularly coming from the students, but the administrators too, that you heard in each session, and it was about confidence. It was about support and the types of supports that are being provided. It was about the push to students, an adult believing in them, an adult having expectations, and I suspect that some of that came from those teachers and administrators that went to the diversity training, had a different view about as one of them said, it changed my life, and now it made me more aware of how I teach students, but also not just, I'm sure, how they teach students, but they understand now how different students learn.
Sure.
So again, and you could almost see it in the students where it was almost like an eye-opening experience, because especially in this group of millennials, it's eye-opening for them when they see an adult that believes in them or that supports them, and for them that's just kind of like, so I guess in that, my question is, how do we replicate this? And I know some of it's just dollar is money, but it's not all about money, because some of it again is about this culture and belief and pushing and expectations and that sort of thing. And even if we don't have enough bodies to do a Carey Institute or the Capstone, even if you look at sort of the model that you're starting to see at many colleges and universities, where they have what's called a success center on the campus, and it's where kids can go and not only get help in typing their paper, but it's tutoring and support and that sort of thing. So maybe it might look like a success center in a high school, where you don't have 4 or 5 or 6 teachers working on Capstone, but at least there are 1 or 2 bodies in a success center at the school that gives them that same kind of support, encouragement, the nudge, the push, the something up. Just one idea, but I guess my bigger question is how do we sort of take some of the best of what we saw today in the heritages and heritage and Carey and that sort of thing, and get that into some of our other schools. And I know for much of it, it's like the Capstones in its first year. So it's hard to know exactly if it's a pilot. It may not be a data-driven decision, but it's certainly a data-informed decision, because we at least know anecdotally, we heard about, again, the confidence, the push, those some of the things.
So I think that's a great question, and I think it's at the heart of the achievement objective. But I can give you an example. A few months ago, we had all high school principals and all middle school principals together, showing them this AP potential tool, how to identify students who the data suggests could do well in an AP course that have never taken an AP course. I think the first step is beginning to identify who these students are. And once you identify who they are, irrespective of what school you go to or what programs are there, I think you can get a group of teachers and educators to surround those students who've been identified to do some of the relationship building, like you're suggesting.
But
go ahead.
But even in that, whose job is it to identify those students?
So we're
Because
putting.
it takes somebody to actually.
Well, we've trained the deans at each of the high schools, the high school principals and APs were there kind of getting trained on this tool. And it's going to take a team, I think, to a point that was made earlier. It doesn't become anyone's job, but when you have 180 kids that need to be recruited, that's the type of thing that you divide up among coaches, pastors, principals, and you get everyone on the same team, and you do a full court press in recruiting these kids to access and rigor. Now, there's also a second part of that equation, is that once we do that, we have to be ready to support them academically. And so if we're not there and we're saying, come in and take these courses, and we're not there to support them academically and they don't do well, we've potentially gone backwards. So what we're careful to tell schools is that at the same time as you're building out these identification and recruitment mechanisms, if you look at our strategic plan, the first strategy, developing a comprehensive academic support structure, is not just about academics, but do I have somewhere to go where I feel respected, that I trust someone, and I can get academic support. That's the type of support mechanism that we're talking about providing guidance on at every level of our organization, elementary, middle, and high. So there is some work that's being done now, but I think to your point, the scalability, how do you put this in schools that, may not be there yet? That's the work we're doing right now as we speak behind the scenes.
Jim?
In our work, I'd like to just challenge that all of this is important work and needs to expand, but I think one of the strongest takeaways I took away from the REI training was they noted very clearly, we're great at identifying problems and creating programs. We forget that we need to be looking at systems. Because we can have a program that's going to, and the Capstone AP has a lot of potential. But if we address the system, we wouldn't need Capstone AP. Right? And so as we think about it, there's some programmatic stuff that we've got to do. That's acute care. But the systems change is what we've really got to be about. And that's the long-term, heavy lifting work.
Absolutely.
Okay. Kevin?
I think we're always going to need something like the capstone. Because the students that I'm hearing about are, and from the one session too, but they're trying to identify those students that have the potential, but need that shove. And it's not, and sometimes it's not even confidence. It's just they're laying back.
Yeah.
I mean, in the old day, we had some of the lower SAT type scores from our top students.
Yeah.
But I would love to see even an 8th grade bridge program somehow with the capstone to start pushing those kids that, as I think the group they said we identified 187 or we have 150. Find those kids. They've got potential, but they're laying back for whatever reason, and push.
Yeah. Well, you know me. I talk and not or.
Right.
And you're absolutely right.
And
I mean, that was another reflection that a number of the kids had. We often talk about the millennials are a different group of kids. I've been working with kids for a long time, and I will contend pretty strongly the millennials are really very little different than they were than the kids that I worked with 22 years ago. There's differences, but it's the same kind of things. You've got to work with focus, you've got to build relationship, you've got to create motivation. The differences are much less than the similarities. And there is that push, and eventually, as a couple of the kids told us, they just get tired of the nagging and say, you know what? I'm going to do it. And what we've got to do is we've got to keep the nagging and we've got to be there so when the kid's ready to say, I'm going to do it, we're there to help
That's what
them.
it takes.
And I do have to say, it was very encouraging to hear 4 Mary Phillips High students
Right.
talking about rigorous courses.
Heck yeah.
Mhm.
Daniel Colvin, I think, has done some really neat things there.
Well, that certainly was an intention of ours. We didn't want the access to rigor work to take on an honors and AP slant because there is rigorous work going on at every level of our organization. I wanted to highlight, to your point, some of that.
Any closing comments? Well, thank you all so much. That was very lifting. And makes me think about things, which is awesome.
You're always thinking about things, Tom. You need to think. You're always thinking. Kind of made me want to get back to the classroom. Get back to the classroom. It kind of made me want to go back to the classroom, like a Nana Center.
So the chair,
Just going to transition. Yeah, we have about 5 minutes before we start our regular meeting.
Yes, Laura came in and then.